In Chapter 9, we take a closer look at that overhead cost and how to allocate that to our product costs. As our overhead cost is typically estimated into our product cost, this can cause some incorrect decisions to be made by management. For example, we may not be costing our product correctly and think we're losing money on this product, when in actuality we are just not applying our overhead appropriately. To fix this problem, we turn to activity-based costing. First, we would want to review what your plant-wide overhead is. We already looked and tried out this departmental overhead, but what we really want to get into is activity-based costing in this chapter. What this does is it breaks down your activity by cost driver and then allocates overhead based on those cost drivers. There's some problems with this method as it's very time consuming, so you have to make sure that those costs outweigh the benefits. But if there's an issue with your product cost, this would be the first step to do to see if it's accurate. So make sure you know those differences, know those definitions of some of these concepts. Take a look at the different activities and what would fit into those activities. And then we'll take a closer look at this activity-based costing. This is a 4-step process. Make sure you fill this in, know these 4 steps, and know where you are at in the process. Because as you can see when we get through this example, that it's not difficult to do, it's just time consuming and a lot of numbers you're playing with. So if you always keep track of where you're at and which step you're on, it'll make this a lot simpler. So we've already been through how to allocate overhead. Now we're just taking that predetermined overhead rate and we're going to calculate it by activity. So we need to look at that predetermined rate. But now to calculate it, we'll have multiple rates for each product. We're going to take our estimated indirect cost. So those are your overhead costs. We're going to divide that by our estimated volume of that allocation base. Now remember, these are all going to be split into cost drivers. They're going to do that for you. You don't need to be concerned about that. What you do need to remember is to pull out that estimated and estimated numbers. Typically, these problems are giving you so much information. It's good to break them down, find what you need to find, and then you'll have no problem solving it. Once we get that rate, we're going to take that, we're going to multiply it by the activity. For each activity, we'll look at those volumes that it has. We'll multiply that to understand how to assign that overhead. So far it looks pretty simple. The only way to really teach you how to do this is to do a problem with it. So we're going to walk through this problem here. It's example 9-43 in your book. This company has 2 different products, a handheld video game and a home type video game. Again, we're going to find out how they're costing these items and if the product cost is appropriate. We're going to compare activity-based costing and traditional costing. So as you can see, they're giving you a lot of information. What we need to do first is find out what they want. So we want to know how much overhead is going to be assigned to each product using these 3 cost drivers. Again, the cost drivers are going to be given to you. And then what we're going to do is find a unit cost using this ABC costing. Then we'll go back, we'll look at that traditional based costing if it were assigned on direct labor cost, and look at the unit cost under that method and compare those. So first thing we're going to do, again, look at that ABC costing. If I come up here, I can remember that first equation is going to take the estimated indirect cost divided by the estimated allocation base for that cost driver to get a rate. So they give us here all the costs that are assigned. These are our indirect costs. Then we're going to take those costs, divide them by our total activity to get our rate. So take your indirect cost by our total estimated activity, and we're going to divide those to equal our rate. So if we look at these runs, if I take 660 and divide by 50, I should get 32, 13, 1200. I'm going to make sure I did that right. I think I did. 6. Yeah. All right. For those tests, again, this is that cost driver. We take that total indirect cost, divide by our total activity, and we get 19,800. And I'll write over here if you're not following how I got that. And then that final cost driver is the shipping orders. If I divide my indirect costs by my total activity, I should get 1240. So now I have each of these rates. Now is where I'm going to take that rate, apply it to each product that I have based on their individual levels of activity. So first, let's assign our overhead is what we're going to do first. So this was really our step 3 where we calculate the rate. Step 4, we assign those costs. And we're going to assign them by product. So let's look at this overhead piece. We're going to take the handheld product first. And what you're going to do is list out each of these cost drivers. We have production runs. We have our tests performed. And we have our orders processed. So those are our 3 activities we're looking at. We're going to bring down those rates that we just calculated. Those are coming from right here. And we're going to multiply that by our activity. Since we're looking at the activity for the handheld, we're going to look at this activity here. So I'm going to bring down, I have 40 runs, I have 12 tests, and I have 100 orders. I can multiply that all out, which I've already done, save us some time. So the total overhead that I would assign for these handheld items should be $889,600. If I just add all those together. Now we're going to do the same thing for this home model. Again, I have my three cost drivers. Those rates do not change. But now I'm going to pull in the activity that relates to the home. So right here, that activity that relates to the home product. So I have 10, 18, and 50. I'm going to multiply that out. 132, 356, and 62,000. And if I add all of that together, it should come to 550,400. So now you've calculated the total overhead. But what they want in this problem is also the total cost per unit. So under ABC costing, let's look at the total cost per unit. Remember, we have three product costs. We have our, we're going to calculate our total cost per unit, which means we have to bring in all three of those product costs. We have direct labor, direct materials, and now our overhead. We're going to look at both the hand product and we're going to look at the home product. So let's look at the hand product. Under the direct labor, we have to go back to this problem and we see here's our direct labor costs and our material costs. I'm going to bring those numbers down. My direct labor was 1,160,400. My direct materials was 750. And my direct labor, or that was direct materials, and then my overhead I'm going to bring down from here that I just calculated. 889,600 gives me a total product cost of 2.8 million. Now I have to figure out how many units I actually have. If I look up here again, finding what I need when I need it. I have 28 handheld, 10,000 home. So I'm going to bring in the number of units, which means my unit cost is going to be $100. Now let's look at the ABC costing. Again, I have to bring in the direct labor, direct materials from right here. Bring those numbers down, which was 439,600, 684, and then I'm going to bring in my overhead I just calculated. If I add all of that together, it's going to give me a total product cost of $1,674,000. You recall I had 10,000 units, which gives me a unit cost of $167.40. So under ABC costing, this one's ABC, you can see the product cost. Now what they want us to do is go back and look at, well, what if we only use that traditional costing? And what if this was based on our direct labor hours? Remember, traditional costing uses just one activity and allocates overhead based on that. So I can look to my direct labor hours here. Go right through it. And I can calculate what my total rate should be by taking this total direct labor hours, my total overhead, and dividing those. So again, your rate based on direct labor hours your estimated overhead is not going to change. That was 1,440,000. But the allocation base is our estimated hours, which was 1.6, which would give me a rate of 0.9 or 90%. Now I would go back and I'm going to have to apply my 90% of direct labor to our product costs. And what we want to do is look at how does that change our overhead and how does it change our unit cost. So going back to that handheld product, I'm going to look at my direct labor. This is for the hand product. I'm going to take my direct labor, I'm going to times it by my rate, so times that by 90%, and I will get my overhead assigned. My overhead assigned then would be, if I did the math right, 360. I'm going to take that, I'm going to change this color a little bit so you can see the difference. And I'm going to put that over here in my overhead column. And what we're going to do is bring in, again, that direct labor. I'm going to bring in the direct materials. Those don't change. The only piece that's changing is the overhead. I'm going to add all of those up to get a total. The number of units do not change. So I can divide that and get a unit cost of 105.53. Not a huge difference, but it is something to consider that may be what's causing the problem. So that's our traditional method based on direct labor. So now let's go down and calculate how much overhead we should be assigning to the home product if we were using our direct labor hours. So the home product had 439,600 of direct labor. I multiply that by 90%, which would then give me 395,640. Go to a dark purple. I'm going to bring that in over here to my overhead number. Again, my direct materials don't change, and direct labor doesn't change. I'll add these together to get 1,940. My number of units do not change, but look what that does to my total unit cost. So if we're basing how much we're selling the product for on our cost, you can see this difference here between these two may have caused us to not properly price that home product. So hopefully that helps get you started. If you have questions, please let me know.